is a movement promoting our stories, and many of us grew up with a strong craving for images we can relate to. Production teams, writers, creative heads have come together to tell stories, and this podcast is their voice. The themes covered are very relevant to the Black community, and anyone concerned by the social and racial injustices that are in place to stifle this voice. The Pan-African voice is not easily heard, and here we talk about our movies, that film or doc which you heard about but didn't get to see. What was the story? Where can I watch it? It now has a voice. Tune in. We walk you through these stories and interview the filmmakers. Welcome. Karibu sana. Karibu sana.
And starting right on the lens. Ready? And action.
This is another episode of the Pan-African Film Podcast. It's actually episode number 30. So we're happy to celebrate this with Debra Aroko today. Am I saying it right, Debra?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, she's the director of the feature-length documentary, Searching for Amani. And I'll just recap for the audience a little bit. It's a story about a 13-year-old aspiring journalist as he's investigating, the mysterious killing of his dad, and it happens within one of the largest wildlife conservancies in Kenya. So as he investigates, kind of looking for answers, he actually instead unravels a much bigger, complicated issue, which includes global warming, social dynamics and conflicts, conservation. The themes touched, like, on top of the murder mystery that we follow, are, land ownership questions and a lot of just cultural issues that come up. So that's just a brief recap. You're welcome to add anything at any point, Debra. And just to conclude the intro, we want to welcome her and also congratulate you on the premiere that was at Tribeca, right? At Tribeca Film Festival, where you premiered, and all the prestigious awards that the film's won so far. But we also want to hear from you directly to tell us a little bit about your career and background. And before we dive into that, I also, for the podcast, wanted to introduce Uba, because it's our first time co-hosting. So everyone's probably thinking, like, who is this other person? Well, Uba's actually going to be co-hosting with me. And she's dialing in all the way from Milan in Italy. And again, so maybe you start with Uba to tell us a little about herself and how she met you, and then we can go to Debra.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Anna, for inviting me and for having me on the podcast. I live in Italy for the past 30 years or so, and I've had the privilege and the pleasure of actually meeting in person Debra while she was in the at the Milan Festival for Africa, Asia, and Latin America films. And her film was the first film I saw, and it was a pleasure having seen this movie, which is very, very deep and has lots of messages, like you just said. I also had the privilege of actually going out for coffee with Debra, and kind of showed a little bit of Milan and what the taste of Italian food is. And then from there, we decided to have this podcast with you. Debra, I hope you enjoyed your experience in Milan, and that the weather wasn't so great, unfortunately, but I'm sure the food sort of, took care of that situation for you.
Yeah, no, it did. I enjoyed my time, and it was the food and the people. That was the most unexpected part of it, was meeting people like Uba, who are so open and interested in African stories. It was really, honestly, I didn't know what to expect when I landed. So it's definitely my top country and top festival experience. And it's an honor to be on this podcast and having this conversation with you both.
Yeah, it was the audience at the first film. That was the first film that was shown at a film festival for these 3 continents, and your film was the first one shown. And I have to be honest, the audience was completely, taken away by the film, and they were very enthusiastic. They actually wanted to, bring it to the students and make the young Italians learn more of what being resilient is, and what they was very astonished with this young man, trying to find and investigate his father's death. And I was really, really thrilled about it as well, because seeing the audience having all sorts of questions, and school teachers, and everybody was there basically. It was very interesting. Okay, Anna, shall we
Yeah, let's go in and like start unpacking the film and really getting to know you better. I wanted to kind of start off by telling us, just speaking to the audience a little more about the journey of the story itself, like what motivated you to start, this investigation, and how long did the whole process take?
So, Searching for Amani, we started filming in 2019 and completed filming and edit in 2024, which is also the year we premiered. So that's around 5 years. It's a long time. And when we started out, Simon was just 13 years old, and it was a month after his father had been killed. Originally, it was not meant to be a feature-length film. It was supposed to be a series of short films, like short vignettes, following children living on the front lines of climate change from all over the world. So it started with following a girl in Antarctica, and Simon was our second subject. And how we came across Simon was actually through our producer, Peter Getz, who was doing a research trip in Kenya, in Laikipia specifically. And he visited the school, which you see in the film, and was just speaking to the children about climate change and how what it's like for them to live on the front lines of it. And there was one child who was very active, and that was Haron, who's Simon's best friend, like very tenacious and answering all the questions. And then Simon was quite withdrawn and quiet. Like I said, it just been a month after his dad had died, and he was coping with that. But because he had this there was just something about him that drew our producer to him and to have the conversation with him. And that's when he found out about what happened to his father, but also found out that Simon had been looking into his father's death because the case had been closed, open and shut, like almost immediately. There were no answers. There was a lot of pain there and a lot of confusion, and just wanted to find the answers for his sake and for his family's sake. So he had begun the investigation on his own, just trying to piece together what happened that day. And you see that in like his little notebooks. And from then on, I think it became quite evident that this story is much bigger than we thought it would be, and we need to focus all our attentions on Simon and his story. It's just like he's just one of those kids that you can't ignore, and that's how the journey started, to following him throughout his adolescence as he's also coping with that, but trying to find out what happened that day and working through his own grief, and trying to find the answers to that.
Almost watu wote wananiambiaga, lakini yani hapa niko kusaidia familia. Watoto wananiambiaga ni kama niko almost kufanana na mzai kitabia. Joto wengi wanasema tu ni peace, pia mimi nilimjua alikuwa peacemaker.
I have a question, if I may. Can you tell the audience about the importance of this story on the impact of conservation, deforestation, social and cultural dynamics in the region? How important this is?
So the story is very important because the issues around conservation, climate change, climate conflict, and the causes of it are some things that are not often investigated or looked into, especially from the point of view of those most affected by it. And we'd also felt that there has been this growing sense of apathy and pessimism towards these issues. People just don't want to talk about it anymore. It kind of seems hopeless, and people don't want to hear about it anymore, and would rather live in their blissful bubbles away from it. So us telling the story through the point of view of Simon, who is a child who's also exploring this issue and getting to know about it as well, because as an African, even while doing research for the film, you learn that a lot of the examples don't center us or don't center our place within, climate change, climate conflict, except for as victims or statistics. And also the language used there is very like distant and almost feels intentionally to keep us out of those conversations. So using the conduit or using Simon as our bridge to understanding this issue and understanding the effects of this issue in the most micro level, because that's what we call it's a microcosm of the grander effects of climate change. So when you're talking about carbon credits or carbon emissions or a warming climate, for audiences and for people to put a real face behind that and know that there is consequences for your action or inaction within this matter, on very real people who don't deserve it. And so the importance of the story is twofold, is to bring awareness to, again, the greatest polluters or the people in power, mostly in the global north, about the effects of their action and inaction. But for local audiences, because this film was also made with local audiences, Kenyan audiences, sub-Saharan audiences in mind, is to help them make sense of their changing world and also remove a lot of that self-blame from them, realizing that a lot of these factors are not in their control, but also because of the agency that Simon exercises in this film to inspire them and remind them that they do have a voice, they do have power, and they can contribute to this conversation and contribute to that change, and they don't have to be victims anymore. So like the film and his story is a larger metaphor for this issue. And at the end of it, Amani means hope. And so this is a story for the pursuit of hope for humanity, for kids, and for this issue to be eventually resolved.
Vile alikuwa tufunza ni kutake care of hizo vitu. My dad was a nature conserver.
By basically doing this film documentary, you're bringing awareness to the situation that both worlds are living. You know, the victims who can be, you know, the people in the rural areas, and the people working on the conservation, you know, wildlife site. Because I did see the movie, so you have two realities, and two realities are fighting to have a better life situation. So I think this is one way of just showing to the audience of what's really happening, and you bring awareness to them. Is that right? Or do you have other opinions on of bringing awareness to other than the film itself?
It's largely to bring awareness to the issue, like the issue around conservancies and the work of conservation has gone largely unquestioned, and it is coming from an older school of thought with the fortress conservation methods of locking indigenous people out for the sake of the ecosystems. But then that is just like a band-aid on a bigger problem that continues to exacerbate and reoccur. Like this climate violence or the violence within that community is a reoccurring thing that is pushed again by climate change, but also by this conservation practices that don't take local communities into consideration. And so we wanted to show all sides of that conversation, that issue, and hopefully get to a point where the groups, the stakeholders involved can get to a level where they can dialogue and see each other as people, see each other's perspectives, and try to figure out how do we learn to, you know, coexist and cohabit for the sake of the kids at the very least, you know.
So have you shown this movie film documentary in Kenya at the moment? Have you made any distribution so that people are more aware of this situation, of this person, you know, this life matter of a young boy, and how much, you know, the family had suffered? And
so the intention was always to bring it back to the continent, specifically back to the Laikipia community. The infrastructure around that is not the best. Not everyone has access to streaming or TV, or how do we get this film out there? And largely realize it's going to be a lot of just community screenings, which do need funding and money, which is partly why we focused on the festival run to just gain supporters and gain funding to launch the film. So we haven't shown it just yet, but we plan on launching the Kenyan theatrical distribution, so starting in Nairobi, where the decision makers are for the large part, in August when schools are closed, and then using the momentum from that to kind of bolster the hype around the film so that there's more active community participation when we do launch the screenings in September, and starting in Laikipia but hoping to expand through Kenya and East Africa as a whole.
I understand. I have a quick question. I'm sure as soon as everybody starts seeing this beautiful film documentary, my curiosity is, you said that Simon today is a young man of a 18-year-old, and I was wondering, I'm sure he's about to finish his school years. What are do you know his future plans, and what is he planning to do university, to do journalism?
Yes. So Simon is 18 years old and Haron is 20 at this time, and so they are transitioning from high school into college. And the film and the tour has allowed them opportunities to, first of all, speak to deans and universities they would have never had access to. So journalism is still at the heart of what he wants to do, and now he's just finding the place for him to begin his education there. He's been able to visit like Colombia and NYU and being invited, to all of this. Howard, he was at Howard University, I think the last month, and just taking a look at the program, because people are truly impressed by who he is and his tenacity and his way of observing the world. So we're doing our best to support his current education to make sure his grades are up and competitive enough for him to get into the schools and take full advantage of the opportunities provided to him. And our executive producers have also offered to support his education. So that's a great relief and a burden lifted from his family. So we anticipate great things from Simon.
That's very good news. Congratulations to everybody, for pitching in and helping him, take his first steps in life, and that this film has made tremendous, change to his life and that of his family as well. And that sort of, gives a hope to so many other children who are in the same situation, who don't have a voice at the moment, unfortunately. That's good. Congratulations. I have another question, if I may. What does Pan-Africanism mean to you as a film producer and
as a film producer and an African?
exactly, as an African as well? Yes.
I think it's for me, Pan-Africanism is just the unity and the coming together of everyone of African descent, despite background or lived experience, despite where they are, because I do believe we share a common ancestry, but we also share a common lived experience in how we are perceived and seen by the world. And Pan-Africanism is a big passion of mine. I think it was my favorite during social studies and history classes. It was my favorite subject, and it's one that didn't have the happiest of ending, because we know that greater powers worked against Pan-Africanism, against the unification of people of African descent throughout. And watching documentaries these days to kind of see how insidious and how targeted it was, like how threatened they were by the idea of Pan-Africanism is shocking, but also seeing the resurgence of that within creative works like documentaries and other film opportunities, seeing the cross collaborations like with podcasts like this one's, but a lot of projects like everywhere that I have been to, even in like random places like Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, finding that people, so that I met like an English, a Black English of Nigerian descent, so a British man of Nigerian descent there, who's also like investing a lot into the continent and into creative work in the continent. Another American lady of African descent, again, investing within the creative space and within changing those narratives and looking for partnerships and synergies within that. Just like it just feels like Pan-Africanism is getting its resurgence, and this time we are smarter, we're better, and we're more tactful about it. And it will be much more difficult for it to be put down. But that's what it means to me in a nutshell.
Okay, in a nutshell. Well, bringing to my next question, and I'm sort of like robbing you off of
You're good,
Debra.
you're good.
So I'll have this one quick question for her. In regards to Pan-Africanism, Debra, how can we present African film producers better in the film festival industries? I mean, I'm talking about big festivals such as Cannes, Berlin, or even Venice, which is one of the oldest film festivals. How do you think that we can represent Africa in a better way, and make everybody see what the continent is really, what the continent is really capable of, producing as film industry is concerned?
That's a great question. It's a difficult one to answer in singularity because there is like a lot of nuance to it. But I would say there has been already, and we need to acknowledge, like a great improvement in representation within these spaces. Not as many films as we would love, or not as many films as we produce on the continent, but our presence is definitely felt there. It can be lonesome, for speaking from someone who's been traveling with their film, where you're one of two or one of three Africans able to attend. So I think one, for getting more work out there, is like supporting the production process as much as we can. The thing is, with Western countries, with the US, Italy, or Europe in general, they have greater endowments and funds and resources available for filmmakers to be churning out as many films as possible. So when you go into competition at Cannes and Venice, even just by sheer number of applications and also films that reach their level of cinematic excellence that they look for, other countries that are better endowed have more opportunities for that, whereas Africans really have to scrimp and save and spend so many years trying to fundraise, because we just don't have those systems of support internally just yet, which is something we should continue to work with. And I think the Pan-African aspect of it comes to play, because you have people who have creative vision and voices and have the ability to tell the stories. They just don't have the support and resources. And then we have people based in the West who have access to these resources that they can pour into African storytelling, or it can also be like in-kind exchange. Perhaps you're a cinematographer or an editor, an actor, so that the Pan-African voices or their diasporic voices are also not lost, and they can feel like they are contributing significantly to that representation there. And just like being present and being loud and being available, but also forming those communities. I think some of the most isolating festivals I've been to is where they're like the festivals don't always think to market the festivals themselves, the films themselves, to smaller communities of either people who have African descent or living in the diaspora, which is surprising, because like those are the people who are gonna fill in the seats. Like, yes, you can cater to the local or the typical Milan
Citizens.
citizens, but there's a big diaspora group that exists, and they know each other, because it's easier to live in those pockets, and it's just like they're never targeted by any of the marketing within that. So you'll find that also like films from Africa just don't sell out or don't have as much audience participation, which like lowers their likelihood of being programmed in the future. But it's like it's both sides. Like the festivals have to go out of their way, but also those communities there need to find ways, if they can, to just be involved in the processes or involved in this film communities, become programmers, or for the festivals to recruit programmers from those communities again, because again, it's that's how it works. I think it's just like recognizing the solutions and the answers lie within those very communities, and those audiences exist, and they are part of your ethos. They are part of Milan or New York or London, and you need to take them into consideration. If anything, they would gain the most value from that. But that's just one of the ways. I think representation can be improved, but there's just like this can be a whole podcast on its own, and just like how we can do better. But I think the one thing caveat I would want to add is the driving force for me for my film is like I'm making films for my people first, like for Africans first, despite having to take it to the West. That's just how things work. That's just the system. But I do envision a time where Africa has its own premiere festivals where like they're sending films in here, or we're premiering here and then going there and having the same status or the same level of respect as a Cannes, as a Venice, as a Tribeca, because at the end of the day, those festivals are geared towards their audiences. So we don't really have festivals that are geared towards African audiences on the African continent where they're accessible, because that would make more sense to just have more. And we have, FESPACO, which is biennial, and Zanzibar and Durban, but they have not reached, for some reason, the level of respect and notoriety that these other festivals have. And, would love to see a change within just like the global mindset around that. I think that would be transformative for African and Pan-African film in general.
We need a
Yeah.
very strong support system, whether it's within the continent and outside of the continent, because a lot of our African citizens, do business globally. So, it makes a lot of sense to have this support system, strong support system.
You're right. We could go on and on about, what's stifling our voices in a way. But yeah, to track back a little bit on, the issue of the resources, can you tell us a little bit about the budget? You said it took about 5 years.
Yes, it took about 5 years, and this film is a co-direction, so it is a partnership between Kenya and the US. My co-director is Nicole Gomli. She is American or Chinese American. And it was a wonderful collaboration, one of the most equitable collaborations that I've been a part of. But a large part of creative work within Africa, and I'm sure you've seen it, is based on philanthropy, because the industry has not, except in places like Nigeria and South Africa, the other industries are just not robust enough to be able to generate profit and in turn resources to be channeled back into that. And a large part of this philanthropy comes from the West, and it comes with an agenda. So for our film, you will see the executive producer credits is all American funders who were great and super supportive, but also there are hurdles or to those types of collaborations where you do have to take everybody's voices and opinions into consideration. And I would say we're really lucky to just have really laid back executive producers who trusted us with the process and with the story, and who had a vested interest in the story being as authentic and as African-led as possible. But that's not always the reality for most filmmakers, and a lot of the time you have to balance between either having creative control and agency and not having as many resources, or having the resources you need but not being able to tell the story that you want. Having every story you create have to fit to whichever agenda they've decided that year that they're trying to push. So if it's health and women's health, all your stories have to fit into that bubble. If the next thing is violence or peace or something like that, it has to fit into that bubble. There's really not so much creative agency with the existing funding models that we have. And for a documentaries don't make profits. Most of the time, the distribution deals are abysmal. And again, the biggest ones are in the West. Local distribution is you actually pay to be on local TV instead of the other way around. So a lot of things are working against creative. So I think for me, the thing that I push for so much is the disruption within all aspects of filmmaking, not just the creative, but the business part. So when people are I'm not a creative, but how do I get involved? If you're an accountant, if you're an economist, if you're a financial manager, filmmakers need to learn how to run businesses. Filmmakers need to figure out how to make this profitable, how to turn this into an actual industry. Marketing is a big hurdle for African filmmakers here. And it's like, if there are people within the diaspora coming in from Hollywood or New York or wherever, working within marketing, working within finance, we can all come together and just like disrupt every force or disrupt every part of that ladder to just create an actual like profitable regenerative industry, so that we are not so heavily reliant on the philanthropies of the good graces of people who don't necessarily understand, relate to, or care about our lived experience.
Just to track back a little bit more on the story itself, and for you personally, Debra, what's the connect for you? Like, why was it important for you personally to tell this story?
For me, I kept thinking, so during the tough parts, I kept thinking about how different I would have been and my life would have been if I had watched a film like this as a child. Because I think the power of our film is, one, it does follow a child who has agency, who uses adults around him as allies and not this full authoritarian kind of forces. Because I think parents and adulthood, especially within African societies, have been so removed from the world of children and only seen as this like oppressive or authoritarian group and not really allies to the cause or people who support children. And so seeing a Black child with agency, using the adults around him as allies or tools to progress his own story and his own dreams, was so powerful. Because I didn't grow up with children like that. I didn't grow up with that kind of representation. I didn't grow up seeing stories like that. I grew up, for the most part, seeing us represented in one way and resenting, for the most part, being an African or being from this continent. Because, being African or being from a developing country was often associated with just like poverty and hardship and pain and and victimhood. So that is why it was so important for me for this film to go out, because like Simon inspired me as much as he inspires the rest of the audiences and continues to inspire that. And seeing that this self-determination came from him, we didn't make him do the investigation. We found him in the midst of that. So he was going to do it whether we were involved or not. We probably made the process a lot easier for him, but it's just like seeing that and needing to project that to not only local audiences but Western audiences to get them. I think that's why people are like, this has to be show, like, we are not helpless. We are not waiting for people to come save us. We are working towards our own advancement. But yeah, that was why this story had to be told.
He was just doing his job, but he was shot with 2 bullets. Everyone in my family wants justice. We want to know, why did they do that? Why did they kill him?
Okay, and yeah, I want to add also that it was really well told, in the sense of the communicating the bigger global impact, obviously, of global warming and what's happening in how, especially in Kenya and other areas where there's still a lot of wildlife, the antiquated concepts of conservation are really impacting, like choosing to do so from kind of like a micro perspective, I think is very, very impactful. So kudos to you, your team, and everyone involved, because it's not easy to bring out the humanity behind that global issue. It can feel really distant and isolated and kind of a bigger problem. But I did feel like you raised a lot of strong issues and maybe not as many kind of solutions or potentials for solutions. Do you have any thoughts on like how, the different dynamics that are at play might kind of come into a better way of coexisting moving forward, and how can your documentary still help with that?
Yes, so yeah, that's a great observation. We do a lot more, raising the issue and not so much the solutions, because while we were shooting, it was still an active conflict, and these groups were not talking or interacting in any way. And one of the things that we had to be very honest with ourselves, and still continue to be honest with ourselves as filmmakers, we cannot fulfill every role. We cannot be the people behind the camera, in front of the camera, and also be the activists there. Our work largely is to be observers, is to observe the issue, package it, and bring it to greater audiences where solutions can be generated from, first of all, the people involved. So at the heart of it, we were hoping that our film could be used as a tool, not to tear people apart, but to bring people together. And that's why, again, the perspective of Simon is easier than if we were speaking to adults who all had their own agendas, or can be such a divisive force. So in terms of solutions and working towards that, we are actually actively partnering with grassroots organizations within Laikipia who are already doing the work, and we're just hoping that our film will one bolster their work, so attract more attention to the work that they're putting into climate resilience. Climate resilience, climate justice, justice for pastoralism. They are the ones who are on the ground trying to create these treaties, or try to create dialogue between the pastoralists and the conservancies. And it's been hard to get all groups together. So inviting people to a film screening and then dialogue, or film screenings and then talks within the communities as well, inviting people from different communities to come watch a movie. And then after that, have guided discussions, because we have created discussion guides that allow people to explore these issues. These are the initial ways that we are feeling that we can start working towards solutions, because again, we do believe that the solutions are in the hands of those most impacted. And like I said, I'm based in Nairobi, not in Laikipia. Their experience is not necessarily reflective of my lived experience, and I don't want to impose any of my thoughts and ideas. Just as a filmmaker, just as a neutral party, just want to bring this issue to them and have them work that out. But there is a great sense and a great feeling of hope. So for Simon and Haron, this is their passion. Working towards peace and conflict resolution is their passion. So what we're doing with them is, during the screenings, having them as ambassadors and representatives of the film, also being the ones to lead these conversations, the ones to answer these questions and ask the hard questions to stakeholders involved. It's going to be a long process, and I wish I had like one clear answer, but to be honest, it's not. It's one of the most complicated conflicts in the region, but there is a sense of, again, hope. And now that the issue has been raised, it cannot be ignored. The eyes of the world, the eyes of the country are on them. And yeah, people are feeling the pressure to actively work towards solutions. But in the meantime, good thing is the rains have come back, and have been steady for the past 2 years. So at least, at the very least, the conflict is not as high, or is not present at the moment. But what happens when the drought comes in again? So still working towards more permanent solutions.
That's pretty much all the questions we had in terms of the film and yourself and just where you're going with it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Uba, or...
But yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question about your future projects, Deborah. I know that you're collaborating with the Skull Foundation. Can you give us any anticipation for your future projects?
Yeah, so the School Foundation, I work as the African Communities Manager for a nonprofit called the Video Consortium, whose work is to support the work of video journalists or nonfiction storytellers across the globe by providing them with the resources and support that they need to tell independent and objective stories, especially in a time where truth and objectivity is being largely persecuted or stifled. And the work with Cole, which was the leading project or a flagship project on the continent, was the Solution Storytelling Project Africa, which, because of its success, was actually replicated in Latin America and Asia, and then will make its way back to Africa. And we were supporting 19 filmmakers from all across the continent to tell stories about change makers within their communities. So either organizations or individuals who are creating active change that is having a global impact. This is in health, it's in agriculture, it's in climate change and conservation. And it was really amazing to just see how many solutions are being generated from the continent itself. I think one of the most impressive ones was like an Ethiopian based or an Ethiopian founded organization that kind of acts as the intermediary between the thing I was talking about, between funders from the West and the projects being impacted on in the global South or in Africa specifically. So like they're the ones, because it's very easy for funders to be like, okay, this is what we want to do. And then they come in without any context or information and put all these demands and also have all of these stipulations that are really hard for most people who need the support to make to fulfill. So it was interesting that and very innovative in a way, but also quite simple for an organization to just stick to that, to be the middleman and make this process more accessible and easier for nonprofits or for people working in advocacy or and any type of NGO work. But yeah, basically that was the 19 projects. We already showed them or screened them, and some of them got global distribution, like on Scientific American and DJ Plus, which raised the profile of the filmmakers because it was twofold. It was to bring African-led solutions to the foreground, but also to raise the profile of African filmmakers, because a large part of the NGO media work was done by expatriates or labor that was imported from the West when local talent existed. And this also, it contributes to everything, largely like carbon footprints, because you're not flying people out, you're contributing to the local economies, and also you're getting perspectives you would never get because there is no language barrier, there is no culture barrier. Yeah, so we're getting for a new round of that, and I am continuing to work on my other films. I have 2 films, one in post-production and one in development, still around the African continent. One is focused on a group of incredible all-female rangers working in Zimbabwe, working in conservation there, and the other one is about a mixed-race athlete who's decolonizing the space of sport climbing or mountain climbing. And trying to find his own place and identity in that space. So yeah, still working towards just getting stories that haven't been seen yet and perspectives that haven't been seen yet of Africans that could have, create real transformation with how we are perceived, not only by others, but also by ourselves. Because I think it is important for us to see ourselves winning, see ourselves succeeding, keep on fighting. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. We have to be resilient and we have to support each other and notice what we are capable of doing. We don't need to, we can have everything in-house. And like you said, there's no language barrier, there's no culture barrier. So it makes things so much easier as well to actually produce things as well. Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That was my last question, Anna.
Yeah, unless we could kind of close out here, but I did want to just ask Debra if you want us to include any kind of websites you want to mention for the audience to direct them, any social media links. We'll happy to add them and again help you spread the word because you're doing a wonderful job on Gara, and let's keep it going. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And you guys are doing a great job as well with this podcast. 30 episodes is not easy. So much respect to the work that you're doing and championing Pan-African voices and Pan-Africanism in general. But for the film Searching for Amani, you can find more information about the film itself at searchingforamani.com. And we're also at Searching for Amani across all social media platforms where we update about where the film is showing. We're going to get global distribution very soon, so where you can watch the film in the coming month, depending on where you are in the world, as well as access to resources that we have created that are largely for educators to use to help their students dissect the greater themes of the films and create more impact with that. And then if you are curious about the Solution Storytelling Project, just look up the Video Consortium .com. So the videoconsortium.com is our website where all these films live, and we're also the Video Consortium on all social media. And we'll also encourage you to watch the films from other continents, because I guess even in this, the journey to Pan-Africanism or to championing Pan-Africanism and also like globalization as a whole, I feel like would be for the betterment of the human race. So watching films from Latin America and watching films from Asia, getting over that language barrier and seeing how much connection we all possess is incredible, and just shifting our mindset and opening ourselves up to a world where we do function from a place of unity, from a place of acceptance, and from a place of valuing ourselves as Africans, as people from Latin America, of people of color, and progressing in that. And I feel like there's so much power there.